What is it about music that can transform your ordinary life into something extraordinary? What is it about music that can touch us so deeply and set in motion the wheel of our emotions? Whether we celebrate each other, nature, or the divine, our desire to express ourselves through music is ancient and a cultural universal. In this program, we will explore music from all over the world and speak with guests from musical, spiritual, scientific, and other realms in a quest to share and understand how music affects us. I'm your host, ADI Braun, and this is Soulscapes. Welcome to the first episode of Soulscapes. This podcast is a gathering place for thoughts, feelings, and musings about music and its importance in our lives. I think it's safe to say that if you ask people if they could live without music, the overwhelming answer would be a resounding no. So what is it about music that resonates so deeply within each of us? To answer that, we should probably travel back to ancient traditions and customs when people first gathered to make sound together. In fact, let's go way back. If you think of the Big Bang Theory, the universe actually emerged from sound and then created and subdivided into more sound. So what are some of the things present in nature that make sounds, things around us, things that the very first humans would have heard? All of these naturally present sounds could have been interpreted as something soothing and pleasant, or, depending on the circumstances, also something disturbing and frightening. It's quite probable that humans' first attempts to create music came out of a desire and need to imitate what they heard. Whether for pleasure or as a means of warning others of impending danger, the need to communicate and connect with others is as old as time itself. One of the most remarkable aspects of music is its universal presence across cultures. Whether it's in the form of drumming, clapping, or chanting, music appears in all known human societies. This omnipresence suggests that music is not a random cultural invention, but an essential part of the human experience and our search for meaning. In most societies, music plays a profound role when it comes to a desire to communicate with the divine, so it serves not only as a means of connecting with others, but also with the great unknown. It's almost impossible to pinpoint the exact time and origin of sound creation as it relates to humans, but one can imagine that a sort of humming and other kinds of vocal sound making probably started almost at the beginning of our existence. But how and when did we decide to use other materials to make sound? In 2009, in a cave in southern Germany, scientists found what they believe to be some of the oldest known instruments dating back approximately 50,000 years, flutes made of bird bones and mammoth ivory. How did these flutes come to be? Well, you can probably imagine cavemen carving up animals for food, and of course, what couldn't be consumed was used for other purposes, like clothing from fur and leather. Bones, on the other hand, might have been used as utensils and even weapons, but also objects for making sound. These bones contained just a few holes that had been carved into them and might have sounded something like this sheep bone flute. From the early bone flutes to our modern-day flutes, this instrument can be found in every world culture and is much prized for its ethereal quality of carrying sound. Joining me today is a truly remarkable musician. He is an internationally renowned Japanese-Canadian flutist, composer, producer, and cultural ambassador. Ron Korb, welcome to Soulscapes.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's have some fun, shall we? Ron Korb. If I say the word music, you say,
Muse, because
oh,
I think, yeah, I think music embodies, it's the embodiment of what music is to me. It's just inspiration, you know?
that's lovely. I was expecting all sorts of things, but that really sums up the mystical origins of it, perhaps, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well,
Definitely.
speaking of origins, what are your earliest memories that involve music?
I would say my earliest memories, this is going to sound funny, but I remember like way back in the annals of time, my mother always would take me downtown during Christmas, and be these sort of puppet shows and things like that. And I was, as a little tiny little kid, I was just so enthralled with that. And there was some live music, so that's probably was the first time I actually heard like an instrument being played.
Mm.
Yeah.
Did you find it mesmerizing or just sort of otherworldly even then?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did. I also remember the first song I heard on the radio that I actually can remember, and that was "When I'm 64" by the Beatles. And I just remember it just sounding so good and just it was just sort of magical, right? Like
Mm,
how
of
can someone come up with something like that? And and honestly, it's an interesting song too, right? It has the
course.
clarinet in it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, they definitely knew all sorts of musics, the Beatles.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm going to ask you, when did you find the flute? Or maybe I could ask, when did the flute or the flutes find you?
Well, I first saw the flute I was a little kid, I guess we're talking about origin, so it would be when I was a child. I was literally playing on the floor with my toys, and there was a show on TV called Take 30
Mm,
with Paul Soles and Adrian Clarkson, and who later on became our Governor General.
right.
Anyway, it was a talk show, obviously a 30-minute talk show, and Mo Kaufman was the guest. And I just remember hearing the flute, and I even remember the shot. It was sort of like taken from overhead. It was sort of like a wide shot that sort of was a moving shot, and he was playing the flute, and that was a magical moment for me. And he was playing the song Two Berets based on the Bach cello suite, and for the longest time as a kid, I thought that was Swinging Shepherd Blues. I thought that tune was Swinging Shepherd Blues. Obviously didn't know much about the blues. And anyway, so that I just remember like it made an impression on me, and I kind of thought, wow, wouldn't music be like a wonderful thing to do as a lifetime career? But that was it. It wasn't like I nagged my parents after that or anything. It was just something I kind of held in my mind.
I love the way you described not only hearing the music, but also seeing sort of with an omniscient eye or whatever the various perspectives,
Mm.
because that could be quite inspiring as well. Just tell us a little bit about the history of the flute in general, how it appears in I don't know, literature, mythology, and then the different kinds of flutes that you
Mm.
play.
Well, a lot of what I do, I'm very interested in. If you look at my music, often I'm taking something very ancient and then contemporizing it. So I'll take like an ancient myth and I'll contemporize it. And in this, in the case of the history of the flute, I mean, they have discovered, bone flutes, like in Germany, like 40,000
Mm-hmm.
years that they've dated, um, that they're 40,000 years old. I mean, flute to me really is the third oldest instrument. I would say the voice would be the oldest instrument, and then percussion, I would say would be the second. Our early ancestors learned how to hit things, I'm sure,
Yeah.
and made little drum beats and things. But I think the flute was definitely the third because the flute, even the whistling, sometimes you'll even hear that effect just in nature itself, because the whole concept of the flute, the whole scientific way it works is that you're blowing a channel of air and you're
Mm-hmm.
splitting that channel of air, and one stream of air is going faster than the other, and that's what creates the sound. So we're
That's
told.
in the Traverso, the Querflöte, as we say in Germany, right?
Well, I mean, all the flutes actually do
Ha.
work in the same way. I mean, because even the block flutes, I mean,
Hmm.
again, it's the same idea. It's just created in a kind of a contraption, right? So, but still, it's splitting the air, and the difference in the speed is what's creating the beautiful sound of the flute.
So there's
And
always science involved in everything, right?
yeah, and but I mean, again, sometimes you do walk through the woods and you hear a kind of like a whistling sort of sound.
Hmm.
And in the story of Syrinx or Pan and Syrinx, where Pan was pursuing Syrinx and she turned into these reeds,
Yes.
and then of course that's where the word panpipes comes from. Like it's a series of things, but a series of pipes, all
Hmm.
different lengths, right? But still same idea. You're blowing over the reed, and it's creating that sound because the air is being split into different speeds, and that I could certainly see just occurring in nature, right? That people like they cut a piece of bamboo or they cut some reed and then they just they
Fiddle
hum
around with it,
yeah,
right?
they fiddle around with it or even just stuck it in the sand and heard it starting to whistle a little bit. And so I'm sure it was discovered, so like I said, it's the third oldest. The, of course,
Hmm.
in the Olympics, you don't really get much credit for being the third, but I would say it's the third oldest. Certainly the oldest of all the woodwind instruments. Yeah.
And what kind of flutes do you play? I mean, from various cultural backgrounds.
The first flute that I played was the recorder in grade school. And then I in high school I started to play the silver flute. And then after that, I mean, because I'm half Japanese, I was always interested. I was always drawn to Asian culture. And eventually I went to Japan and I studied the ryuteki, which is literally means the dragon flute. um,
Mm.
and the Shinobuwe. So I studied those flutes. I mean, in a sense, I kind of studied shakuhachi too, not so much playing it, but I knew quite a few shakuhachi players, and I incorporate a lot of the same techniques that they use even on the transverse bamboo flute.
Mm.
Yeah.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking about not, we talked about Pan and Krishna as mythological figures,
Mm, mm,
but good old Mozart actually has two kinds of flutes in the magic flute. So not only does he have the Birdman who plays, I'm going to call it the pan flute, basically, right?
mm-hmm,
But we've got Tamino who appears at the beginning of the opera, who plays a more conventional orchestral flute,
mm-hmm,
and the purposes of each of these is quite different, right? I mean, because you talked about dragon, Tamino is trying to calm down this dragon that appears.
mm-hmm,
Papageno is playing with the birds, hoping to attract a mate. Historically, or I
mm-hmm.
mean, the flute is such an enticing instrument, I find.
Mm. Yes, it is. It's an enticing instrument. And again, it exists in every kind of music too. Like it exists in folk music, it exists in classical music. And classical music, not just the Western classical music, but of course, East Indian classical music like the
Yep.
Bansuri, and of course, the shakuhachi in Japan. And of course, I mentioned the ryuteki, and of course, in China too with the ditsu. So it's just really everywhere. And I think it is a primal instrument. And that's why,
Mm.
it has that thing. By the way, I want to actually plug my album too, my uh, Global Canvas album,
Yeah, we'll hear
be-
something from that after. Yeah.
because actually this album is about the origin of the Korean flute, the Korean daegum. And if you don't mind, I want to read the story, the myth that goes along with it.
Please, please, let's hear it. So, Daegu.
Daegum, yeah. It's a transverse bamboo flute that's very, very essential in Korean traditional music. So anyway, this is the myth about the flute. So in 681, the Silla king, Munmu, requested on his deathbed that his ashes be scattered in the sea where the whales live, and he would become a dragon and protect the Silla kingdom from foreign invasion. After he died, his son, King Simon, had a dream where his father and the top general, King Yum Shin, told him that a bamboo flute would bring peace to everything under the sky. When Simon awoke, he sailed out to the Gomun temple he had made in honor of his father. On the mountain there was a special stalk of bamboo which he brought back to the palace and fashioned into a flute called manpasajuk. When he played the flute, it called to the spirits of his father, King Mumu, and who had the power to calm the seas, to prevent natural disasters, to cure disease, and cause enemy armies to retreat. So this flute is also referred to the flute that can calm 1,000 waves.
What a beautiful image that is.
How would you say, what role does music play in your day-to-day life?
Well, I guess for people like you and me, I mean, music is actually our job too. So it sort of ekes into every little crevice of our life in some way, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's an essential part of life, and I'm always amazed at how music has such an effect on, your well-being and your mood, and if you're feeling anxious or whatever, you can put on some music that sort of inspires you, or kind of takes you off to a different place. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you listen to music because you're kind of studying it. You're kind of wondering, how did they do that? Or especially if it's flute music, like, how does he bend the note this way? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you're listening like that. I know some jazz musicians who find that they can't really listen to jazz recreationally because they're always analyzing it. If they hear it, they hear a solo, and they're constantly analyzing that solo and the
Or
chord
a chord
changes.
cluster trying to
Yeah,
analyze that chord.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so they can't just purely enjoy it. So they'll listen to maybe some, and I'm not joking. They'll listen to like heavy metal music or some other kind of
Mm,
alternative rock music where they're not analyzing the music like that. They can just purely enjoy it.
yeah.
So, if I asked you if you can imagine your life without music, the answer would be?
It would be a resounding no, I would
Yeah. Right.
say. Yeah,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I would even go farther than that. I would say, I suppose if I lost my hearing and I didn't have music, I I still would. I don't think I could live without art. And I kind of put them all together, like film, visual art, dance, music, film. I mean, they're all, to me, they're all interconnected.
Well, and of course, even if you lost your hearing, as we know from the great Evelyn Glennie, um, sound can be felt, right? And
Yes.
so, even if you
Yeah.
have that tactile experience, you just wouldn't want to be without that experience. I want to just go back to that fascinating story that you shared about that particular Korean flute.
Hmm.
If there were to be an instrument that would be applauded as or hoped to be an instrument of peace, I'm thinking about music invoking peace. I'm also thinking about upliftment in music. So
Hmm.
I wanted to know, well, I would love if you would share your thoughts on how does upliftment in music happen? Who is the uplifter? Who are the uplifted? Or is it too grand a question? But let's just start with: do you view yourself as seeking to uplift when you perform?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I kind of thought when you asked me that question over the phone, I said like upliftment is my middle name, meaning that when you look at your career, I feel like when you look at your career over the decades and you look back, you sort of realize that there's certain traits in everything that you do. And when you're doing it, let's say 20 years ago, you don't really realize that. You're just doing things, and you're not really cognizant of certain patterns in what you do. But just as like the other example, there's a famous Canadian filmmaker, and he says that he likes to bother people. Like, so when he
Hmm.
makes a film, he wants to put people, you know, like a little bit askew. He wants to bother them. He wants them to be a little bit scared or frightened or anxious.
Hmm.
And that's what his thing is, right? And horror film directors are even worse. Like, they really want to scare people, right? I shouldn't say worse. I mean, people enjoy horror films, but I kind of notice that in my music, I'm my end goal is probably, um, it is to sort of bring peace or uplift people. I mean, sounds corny to say that. It sounds like I'm just making it up,
No, it
but
doesn't.
when you look at it, like, for instance, here's an example. Like, when I used to play some festivals, and people would come up to me and say, "Oh, your music is so relaxing, right? And of course, back then, I kind of bugged me because I wanted to be edgy, or I wanted to say,
Right.
wow, your music's so exciting and this and that. And I mean, like, I have drums, I have guitar, I have bass. Like, you think, and we're playing up tempo tunes, and you think that some people would use other adjectives, but most of the time they go, "Oh, I just love your music. It just gives me such peace and this and that." And so, but now I don't really mind that, because now I realize they're right. Everything I do sort of has that essence to it. And I guess it's just because of who I am. And if somebody else has a different essence, like maybe they've had a really tough life, and they've had, it's that the sadness and the gravitas comes
Mm.
through everything that they do. And that's great, because we like, people, and myself included, I like to see movies that can be really heavy and this and that. But maybe it's not really when I was put on this earth to do. So
Well, I mean, upliftment doesn't mean it, like you're saying, it has to be happy, happy all the time.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it's important to be hot and bothered so that you know what the opposite is. How does the
Hmm.
saying go? Only the irritated oyster makes a pearl, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that you, as a composer, when you're writing music, because I asked you as a performer, but let's talk to you as a composer, and you have an inspiration. Uh, are you drawn to more of an uplifting narrative in general than to uh, anything else that might be, I don't know, more politically motivated or more emotionally, angrily motivated? What is the driving? Do you have driving emotions?
Again, you can almost say all of the above to a certain degree. But even if I was to do like a political song, it wouldn't probably come across that quite that way, especially since my music is instrumental. So, well, of course, when you're writing lyrics, then you can be very direct with your messaging. With me, I'm kind of working more with images,
Mm,
and I mean, that's another thing people say, like, when I'm listening to your music, I see this image like a film, and each person has like a different take on it. Like, some
mhm,
person will say, "Oh, this reminds me of my mother," and then some other person will say, "This reminds me of when, I went to Japan, or I went to Europe, or, when I first had a grandchild," or whatever. They have all these different images that they come up, and to me that's great, because they're kind of building their own narratives based on the songs. So that's that's something that I do try to put in. I try to put different colors and things in to stimulate different visual images.
mm.
Um,
Um, we say that music has great transformative powers and
mhm.
it gives rise to extraordinary moments, however small and calm they can be. But I'd love for you to share what have been some of your most transformative and extraordinary musical moments in your life, things that really
Mm.
stick out in terms of an all-round transformative experience, given the fact that we're surrounded by music.
Well, and that's a good point, because we are surrounded by music, like everywhere we go, every shopping mall. Okay. I think one thing I often think is one of the most transformative experiences was when, as a performer, was when I played at Heian Shrine in Kyoto. And this is many years ago. And it was for their cherry blossom viewing concert, actually, which
Mm,
kind of ties into what I'm doing at the Culture Center this month. And it was just, I mean, first of all, Kyoto itself is just extraordinarily beautiful. I mean, all the temples there, but Heian Shrine is one of the very important shrines there. And they have a beautiful stage, and there's actually even like water and a little island in between you and the audience. And the cherry
mm,
blossoms are on the other side, and it's just very ethereal playing there. And I mean, I must say it was somewhat strange to play, because when you play and then there was silence, and then you'd hear the applause coming from the distance. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. I mean, just like a surreal experience, like something out of a dream or out of a movie. So that was definitely one of the things I would always point to. And another experience I would say is just the first time I heard shakuhachi live in Japan, which was my friend Tani Senzan, who unfortunately is no longer with us. But just the tone, and I'm talking about, this is just in his house, like just in
mhm.
his room. and just again to hear the detail and the emotion and the different textures that he could play, that was very special too.
Mm. No, you really then you feel like you're in very intimate, perhaps some sort of divine company, especially if it's in such a small space. It becomes very special then.
Yeah, I'm curious, what is your transformative moment?
Well, we'd have to go into, I'd have to think a little bit more about that. But transformative, do you know, I find like I'm transformed on a daily basis. I try to be a little fluid that way, and it's not easy, but
Huh?
I find there'll be some little sound I hear, or it could be just a bird tweeting, or sometimes even, the dumbest things, a commercial. There can be tiny moments of transformation,
Mm-hmm.
but if we're talking about deeply touched, it would be something. I remember being an usher at Roy Thompson Hall. Roy Thompson Hall opened in 1982, which was when I moved to Canada, and I was part of the first usher group.
Wow.
And in that first week, they did Mahler Symphony of a Thousand,
Mm.
and just the sheer physicality of that piece that called for three choirs, a gigantic
Mm.
orchestra, many, many soloists, the power of that music, and then the words about everything is transient, but the great divine is not, is eternal. So probably my most transformative moments have come when music is somehow connected to spirit, either the great spirit out there or the spirit in me. I've had some very cool experiences in some places of worship too. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you for the question. If you had to choose, this is tricky, but if you had to choose three or four pieces of music that you, if I say go to for upliftment, but for lack of a better word, to put you into a state of feeling good and feeling full of possibilities and benevolence, what would this kind of a playlist look like?
Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna sound like this super classical guy, but I would have to because I actually listen to. Well, okay, first of all, I would say Stevie Wonder.
Ah,
There's so many pieces of his that like like that song "Overjoyed." I
oh
mean,
yeah.
that song literally will make you overjoyed, and so many of his pieces are great. And I've seen him live 3 times. I saw the first time was in Tokyo, but I've seen him live twice in Toronto,
Isn't she
and
lovely? What the birth of his
oh my
child?
God, yeah.
It's euphoric. It's euphoric,
It's
right?
euphoric. But there's another other song. You know that song I Am Singing? You know that song?
No, no.
I am singing.
Mm.
He there's a part where he changes the key and it just is like wow, like the world just opens up. I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it because it gives
Uh,
me goosebumps. So I would say Stevie Wonder for sure. But
okay.
um in classical, I would say Beethoven Pastoral Symphony, especially the first movement. That is just beautiful. And it's not just, I like that word upliftment because it's not pure happiness. It's like happiness with enrichment, I think, is maybe what uplifting is.
Yes, and also
And
I think there's work involved when you're when you want to uplift and you want to be uplifted. There is some sense that it doesn't happen automatically. This
yeah,
joy happiness thing. There is effort.
yeah, yeah. And Glenn Gould has a version of that too, that he arranged for piano, which is also beautiful.
The
And
pastoral.
yeah, yeah, the pastoral, the symphony, and it gets me every time. It gets me every time, and I did hear that as a kid, that we had an 8-track tape, ha ha ha,
Hmm.
and I've always loved that, and also I love the fact that it's program music. It's painting this scene of nature, and you can just see the images, and then of course the storm in the fourth movement. It's just that I think got me into the whole idea of music relating a story.
I love
Yeah.
the fact that your playlist really looks at all kinds of musics, and I love that new word. So
Another song I really love is Song of Bernadette. You know that song? It's a Leonard Cohen song, but there's a Jennifer Warren's version off
need
this
to
album
listen
called
to that.
Fame.
Need
Yeah,
to
you
listen. Yeah.
have to listen to
Okay.
that. It's
Great.
it's it's about Bernadette, Saint
Mm.
Bernadette, but it's one of I feel it's one of the Leonard Cohen's best songs, even though a lot of people have never heard of it.
Mhm.
And Jennifer Warren just does such an incredible job singing it. And it's the kind of song that makes you cry, but it uplifts you at the same
Mm.
time.
We're going to list all of these your song choices or your music choices for 3 or 4 pieces of music that you would choose for upliftment on your playlist will be listed on the podcast. So, Ron, it's been a thrill. You are the first guest for Soulscapes, and I think it's really fitting because, as you said, the flute is the second or third oldest instrument. So why not start at the beginning? I want listeners just to know, where can they go to find out more about you? What's your website or best?
Well, the best way is, just to go to my website, www.ronkorb.com. But I mean, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, I'm on all the platforms as well. And I have quite a few videos on YouTube. And, but yeah, you can reach me just through the website.
And we're just going to spell it. It's RONKORB. A bit of German in there too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Korb,
My father was German. Yeah.
We're going to leave the listeners with a track from your new album. And I'd like for them to hear Desire. And could you just briefly set it up, and then we'll let the listeners be taken away, perhaps,
Hopefully
into different realms. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Desire, the original title of the song was Unspoken, and I might end up using that title again. So don't I don't want to get any letters about that.
So should we say Desire / Unspoken?
No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't. But I just want to give you an idea what the song is about. For some reason, I keep coming up with this idea of a song that is about two people being in love, but for some reason they can't really be together because of either, like, I have a song called Forbidden Love off of Asia Beauty, which is sort of again about probably about societal differences within like the ancient world, and maybe someone's an aristocrat or something like this. And there's another piece called Palace Garden, which is kind of the same idea. It's about being in the Forbidden City and hearing somebody or being in love with somebody on the other side of the wall, and of course you can't get together. And this Unspoken song is again about that. And it's a very Japanese feeling, because in Japan we kind of tend to sort of suppress our feelings and even our words. If we even really admire someone, we won't tell them so directly. And so that's what Unspoken means. It's that unspoken kind of communication, connection, obsession. So that was the basis for that. But when and there's the Japanese koto is in there. I'm using a Japanese scale. It has a little bit of a sense of the Japanese enka, which is that kind of those really, heart-wrenching kind of songs that they do, and the koto is in there. But I always wanted to have tabla on this, and I have a friend in India who's a very good tabla player. His name is Muthu Kumar. I sent him the song. He just loved the song, but he said, "Ron, this song, you got to call it Kama or Desire, because that's really what it is." And it is. I mean, like, again, I'm being a little bit too pussyfooting around here.
Does
like
it have a little bit of a restraint in it, Desire, then?
Yeah, I guess it does. But when he plays the tabla,
it's not restrained.
He just said this song just has so much sort of soul and emotion and kind of attraction. And so he said, you got to call it Kama or Desire. And I said, sure, why not? I'm always been pussyfooting around, never being direct, very Japanese. Let's just call it Desire.
Say it as it is. Now, just say again, this is from your most recent CD, and the
Yes.
CD is called
Global Canvas.
What an absolutely beautiful piece of music. So evocative. Ron Korb, thank you so much for being the first guest on Soulscapes.
You're very, very welcome. It's been an honor to be on the show.
From north to south and east to west, music inhabits every corner of our world and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed my musical musings with flutist-composer Ron Korb. Join us again next time when I speak with Cree Anglican minister Ray Aldred about what makes music so important and why it matters in our day-to-day lives. I'm ADI Braun, and this is Soulscapes.